our lag. Good morning. The Finance Committee meeting is ready to adjourn at November 2nd, and I have 10:36 a.m. All members are present, that being Alderwoman Finlayson to my right and Alderwoman O'Neill to my left. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to revise the agenda as it's written.
Madam Chair, I'll move an amendment to move SA 20 to follow SA 16 and to add SA 21 to the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Did I say adjourn the meeting? I did,
Yeah.
didn't I? That was quick. At this time, could I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of October 19th, 2022?
Move approval of the October 19th minutes.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We're going to start on the supplemental appropriations. Before we start on this, I just want to make a general comment, and it's for my own benefit as well. In reviewing these supplemental appropriations, it's in our purview as a Finance Committee to look at the financial impact over the life of the project, any future risks in that, a validation of the source of funds, and any accounting for inflation. Although tempted, it is not in our purview to discuss the merit of the project unless what we're presented with today is not in line with the City Council's policy that was the genesis of the project to begin with. Is that clear? Or else we'd be here forever. It's a full agenda, so I'll try to limit my questions. And we're going to begin with SA 16. As Alderman Finlayson said, we're going to put 16 and 20 together. So let's start with 16, and I believe we have a representative from the Mayor's office, and you can introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Kate Pettit, Chief of Staff to Mayor Buckley, and thank you so much for the agenda change. I appreciate having the two items together today. I think the last time I came before you, it was to do a similar appropriation. Where today, the two items that I can speak to are donations to the Mayor's office that have supported community events that we have held in partnership with Mr. Rodney Barnes. You may remember the book bag giveaway we gave at the end of August that we held at the end of August with Mr. Barnes' support, and he donated $7,500 for that event, which we came before you, which I came before you and spoke to. And he's done a similar thing for another recent event, which was a Halloween event on the weekend called Haunted Hilltop. So Mr. Barnes' partnership with the city has evolved. He wants to keep doing things that help support particularly underserved children and families in the community and ensure that those children have opportunities to, do other things in life just as he has. So the Haunted Hilltop was a Halloween event that invited particularly underserved communities, but we had a broad representation of families there. We had around 500 people attend the event, which was held at Pip Moyer Recreation Centre. And there were candy bag giveaways and there were healthy food options as well. There was costume competition and a whole raft of activities so that children and their families would have a safe space to enjoy all of the festivities of Halloween. The Mayor's office paid the upfront costs for those and so now Mr. Barnes's donation, which will cover the bulk of that event, is before you for appropriation, $7,500.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
I do have one question. When was the event actually held?
I'm sorry, I think I said it was last Sunday, but I think it was the week before, Sunday the 23rd of August.
It does say that here. I didn't know that was the actual.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I should just mention to give acknowledgement to all our partners in the city. While the Mayor's office provides, the liaison point and outreach to our Hispanic and African American communities in particular, this was really a joint event with community partners, but also with our city department partners, particularly Rec and Parks, the Office of Community Services. We couldn't have done it without a true city partnership getting involved for this event. So we're very grateful to everyone.
Well, thank you.
Madam Chair, I'll move that we give a favorable recommendation to SA 1623.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, and thank you, Rodney Barnes, as I'm sure he's diligently listening. SA 20 is the charitable contribution from Comcast.
That's right. So this event goes back to the first event that we did with Rodney Barnes that I referred to, which was the school bag giveaway that we held at the end of August, just prior to school going back. That event was also held at Pip Moyer, and we gave out 500 bags of school supplies to children and a whole raft of other, there was a free bike giveaway competition and a whole raft of other activities. Again, sponsored by Rodney Barnes, who donated the bulk of the funding for that event, but we also had a generous donation from Comcast for $1,000 that helped to cover the general expenses.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
No, Madam Chair. I'll make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation to SA 2023.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to backpedal to SA 17-23. Wait a minute. Yeah. And I believe this is IT. And if we could just have the representatives at the table introduce yourself.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Brian Paquin, IT manager.
Ricky Truitt, security consultant.
I'm sorry, who? Hi.
Hi, Ricky Truitt, security consultant for City of IT CIP.
Oh, okay, cool, thanks.
Former.
Annapolis Police
Oh my gosh,
security director.
wow. 2 for 1. Go ahead.
Just a summary of what we're doing. So we're asking for supplemental allocation to the city security CIP of $500,000. The supplemental funds are required because of a couple of things, primarily rising labor and material costs, specifically for underground work, fiber optic cabling, the infrastructure that we're putting in place to improve and expand the city camera network. Those costs have more than doubled in the last 3 years and continue to climb. We have several initiatives that we're looking to get done in the next 6 to 9 months within this fiscal year that just the infrastructure work alone, we're north of $300,000 in work there. Ongoing labor from the contractors that do the actual networking and camera installation and configuration could exceed $200,000 in the next 9 months. So we're looking to expand the available funding in the city security CIP.
I just have one quick question. Is this a proprietary procurement? In other words, it's not a competitive bid situation. We have to continue with the contractor that we have, correct?
Yes, correct. We have a fiber optic and underground contractor that the city has been partnered with for well over a decade. That's our primary resource for installing fiber optic, both overhead and underground. We are purchasing equipment on a state contract vehicle.
We've already competitively bid the other parts of the contract. They've already been awarded. We just haven't fulfilled it all. We bid that out prior to Mr. Snyder's retirement.
I don't know what that means. They've already been awarded, but we didn't have the funding allocated?
We in the RFP, we allotted more items than we allotted for the entire amount, but we only awarded the amount of services by which we had funding for. So we future build out to cover ourselves, knowing that we would need to go back or we would potentially have this additional expense. And so to avoid the multi-month rebid of an RFP for a second phase, we put it all and had that be a complete package, and we awarded an initial phase that was purchased in March for equipment. That's equipment specific.
Okay, Madam Chair, could we ask Director Dickinson to chime in? Is this, well, tell me, I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to hijack your question, but it wasn't.
So the RFP was meant to cover the work. The work would have spanned more than one fiscal year. So in the fiscal year earlier, when they had the allocation in the CIP to that project, they awarded an amount of the contract to match that amount. And then in a 23, we've got more funding in there to continue the work on into the future years. They can't spend the 23 funding in the CIP until 23 rolls around. So they only place the award with the contractor up to the amount we have to spend. And then they award the second piece accordingly when the funding is available. So they're saying that the proposal was for a project that spanned fiscal years.
Okay.
And they awarded it based on how much funding was available at the time.
Okay, and so today they're asking for an additional,
This is an additional amount, and there were factors that were causing the project to go over, and then they'll have to discuss those details with you.
so is this in advance of what we normally would be doing? If we're doing this multi-year, we already have allocated the $278,000. I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that next year it would be something similar to that amount, 300,000, let's just say, and the following year another 300,000 to keep these cameras updated and operating.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And regardless of what the rate of inflation, continues to be in years moving forward, you can bet that the cost of the equipment and the cost of, what we call glass, the actual fiber optic, the equipment, the mounting, those costs are going to continue to increase. So, be it 5%, 10%, 15% year over year for the CIP, those costs are asked for reappropriation to the CIP would continue to probably grow by some percentage year over year.
I see Ms. Dickinson is raising her hand like a good student.
This isn't, yes, I just wanted you to know, I wanted to look up the capital project page for you to say that this is,
I'm
Go ahead,
look
but-
at it. Go ahead.
Okay.
I just wanted to.
Yeah, so you're right, we had 278,000 in FY '23, and this 500,000 is in addition to that 278,000 in order to add to the project, and you'll see that there's funding, a modest amount, 100,000 each year going out into the future that we intend to appropriate here.
So will this 500 take the place of the 100,000 projected for out years?
That's for the project managers. I'm sure there's ongoing work that has to be done in all cases for the city
Okay,
security.
well, because that's what I want to know, if this is escalating those out year costs, or is this in addition to the 100,000 you're going to need for next year and the 100,000 you're going to need for the year after that? And take out your crystal ball and just tell me.
You read my mind. Yeah, it's very difficult to say with any level of to give you any assurances on that. But I understand what you're saying, and we'd like to be able to say yes.
Okay, well, that would be your plan.
I think the failure rate that we've had has been much higher than expected.
Of cameras, to be
Cameras and the changeover in staffing and restructuring of how these projects were previously managed with city staffing and city resources that were on staff has quickly escalated the response time and the replacement time of how some of those things may have happened. So many of the items that are causing certain costs and items to be moved forward in the plan and ask for additional funding now may have been items that previously were covered by staff that I may have overseen.
Is the fiber optics part of what's driving this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The infrastructure that has taken place that we were hopeful that would be a multi-year, that we would be able to do over a longer period of time, due to unforeseen crime, unforeseen circumstances, other capital projects that are in place, it has required us to move our projects in line with that to minimize the funding that it would take for us to complete the project. So for example, as the new public works building is going in, the fiber optic that we were going to put in years 2 or 3 to come along West Street to make it out there, it only made sense for us to then move our funding forward to complement that, to do our city infrastructure along that way. Same thing as Church Circle goes forward, same thing as the Pit Moria has gone. So as those projects have come forward, originally the plan wasn't as cohesive, or as it was. It was more ad hoc, and now we're doing our very, very best to marry all these projects up and to put all those pieces in place. But what that's caused is advancement and what we had mapped out as a plan that would take us several years to complete.
I'm going to blame this all on you.
That's fine. I'm very okay with that.
I've seen the benefit of your work.
Thank you.
With the fiber optics and the mobility, I guess, that we have. And I appreciate your looking ahead to the new, for the public works, for example. Had not even thought about that, and I'm sure we haven't allowed for it in the budget as far as security and cameras and all that stuff is concerned. So I appreciate that. And of course, I'm going to support this. What I would like to see, however, is a real list of what you're doing.
Certainly.
To make sure that it is equitable.
Great.
Amongst, all wards and all hotspots, I'll just say.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
But thank you.
To expand on that, just so that we know if we have exposure on this total project, when you extrapolated in the budget and you put in $100,000 looking forward and came to a total number, was that total number scope, has that changed? I'm talking about the scope of the scope
Yes,
of the
it has.
project has changed. So it isn't just pricing, it's the scope, okay. So it's not a sort of a linear extrapolation. You are adding 55% to the 23 budget. Are we going to assume that you're adding 55% to the subsequent budgets, or is it going to be all kind of choppy based on the scope?
We'll have a better answer.
I mean, I guess we need a more, to Alderwoman Finlayson's point, a revised scope, and
Sure,
what
agreed.
that extrapolation looks like to get to that 5-year budget.
Yeah, and I think what Mr. True and I are thinking is as we head into budget season, which is
Oh, no, don't say that.
coming upon us very quickly, that we would revisit that scope
Okay.
and put together a revised kind of
Yeah.
maybe 2-3 year plan on that. A good example to speak to the unforeseen nature of how we've had to kind of move things in and out is, without going into any details, we've come up with, I'm trying to think of a way to say this,
Yeah, I know you're dealing with, I know you're
without
dealing with
saying too much.
confidential stuff, yeah.
So a building security issue citywide that has, while not completely unforeseen, forced us to change priority and take a cost that was perhaps down the road and actually move it into this fiscal year, which then further increases with the cost increases of everything that we've talked about previously, has added to that as well and made us really need to move swiftly on this one particular item.
I understand that priorities changed. Alderwoman O'Neill, do you have any questions?
I do not, thank you.
At this time, could I entertain a motion?
Sure, Madam Chair, I'll move a favorable recommendation for SA 1723.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping us safe.
Mr. Paquin, do I need to come see you today?
I'll catch up with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just need a wire, that's all, just a wire.
All right, next in line, okay, we have SA 18, which is a fleet replacement, general fund. At the table, could we have there you go. We told her to expect that.
Danny?
I turned it off. I guess I have that bad reputation.
All right, one of the end results of this discussion is that, and I'm sure the finance department will agree, is that we really need to be clear on A, the source of funding, and B, the delineation, for lack of a better word, between the electric mobility project and what is in the transportation budget. Who is here to speak for the electric mobility project if that comes up? Jody?
I'll just give you a little bit of update. David Gerald is not going to be here, but I've texted with him to find out his thoughts on whether or not, the question that I raised about the $250,000. And he clarified that the CIP project had, part of the scope was buying one small circulator bus. And if the bus that they're purchasing is going to be used for one of the circulator routes, that would fall under the scope of what the project intended, so that the county grant would be able to be used for the purchase of these buses, if one of the buses they're purchasing is going to be used for the circulator route. So then I'll leave the details on how they're utilizing the buses that they intend to purchase to Marcus and Kwaku.
Okay, just for background, I know we're jumping ahead, and I don't want to confuse my colleagues here. Well, right now, this allocation assumes that we're using the capital reserve fund to fund it. And what I hear you saying is that could be one of the buses is in the electric mobility. Oh, no, she's shaking her head. Okay.
So in and amongst the materials should be a chart showing that these buses cost far more than what you see here. These two buses cost, and I don't have it in front of me. So we need several funding sources to cover it.
Okay, hold on. Do my colleagues have
yes.
this piece of paper? I have it, and I don't know where I got it.
I don't think so. What does it say?
It came in an email, or is it in the?
No, it's not.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, we can share that. I think that came in an email directly from Kwaku. Oh. Okay, so, yeah, she has it. Okay, so
She has a copy.
yeah.
I don't have a copy.
Yeah, no. All right, we're square here. So what's before us is the purchase of 2 electric buses. Right? Yeah. Right.
Yeah, all right.
And so marrying that up with the supplementary appropriation, it looks like you are asking for an additional $258,500, rounding up, right?
Correct.
Which is that line item that says local city funds, including 5% contingency. And that's to cover this total cost. Okay, I get
Correct.
that.
Yes, this is, you're approving an SA for one of the sources.
Okay.
Only because the other sources are already available.
So I don't have to even talk about the electric mobility plan then?
No, the question was whether the 250,000 that you see here,
Yeah?
right now it's programmed in a capital project. It can be used for the purchase of the buses that will be purchased in through the transportation fund. That was my question earlier. That's been cleared up. As long as one of the purchased buses is going to be used for a circulator route.
Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Please, I have used my threshold of stupidity
The
here.
2 buses that are being purchased with this funding, the 1.5, one of them can be used as a circulator. Does that mean that we take one of the circulators out of operation to use it as a regular vehicle, or will this just add to the fleet of circulators?
Okay. It could be used on the circulator route. The idea is that as part of the 100% mobility plan, which includes the circulator, we will put this electric bus on that route. Technically, it's a replacement of one of our existing diesel bus, according to the grant information. So once we replace it, we take it out. So it should be, if the city decided the downtown shuttle service, which is the new name of the former circulator, that Annapolis Transit runs that particular service currently, a large portion of it is outsourced through our parking contract. So if the city decided we will run it, then it's our pleasure or our intent to put all the 2 electric buses on that particular route.
Okay, but I thought I heard Ms. Dickinson say that part of the funds coming from the county have to be used for the circulator. Did I misunderstand that?
The county has given the city $250,000 toward its 100% electric mobility plan. Right now, that program is in the CIP. We have a capital project. One of the sources in that capital project is the 250, along with many other sources, grants, et cetera, for funding. So these buses are going to be more than 250,000, as you can see. And so we're going to use that as one of the sources towards the 2 electric buses, but the purchase is actually taking place through the transportation fund and the fleet replacement fund, not through this capital project. So we're going to have to do a transfer from the capital project
When you
to
say
fund
capital
it.
project, you're talking about the electric.
Yeah, the
mobility plan project.
100% electric mobility capital project will transfer the monies over to the transportation to help with this purchase.
But that funding that's transferred can be used for other things other than the mobility, the circulator.
It can be used for the purchase of an electric bus for the circulator route.
Okay, that's my question.
And so that's the grant from the county. The county's grant was intended to assist with the purchase of an electric circulator bus.
Yeah,
And we've already gotten the capital grant and the large urban grant, so those are already in hand. So this is the last piece that's needed.
Yeah.
And the city has to kick in some of the money from the capital reserve fund to be able to
Right.
purchase the.
So that's the
yes.
258,000.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm good. Thank you.
yeah. I think it would have been clearer if on the line item 250,000, if you had an asterisk saying that, is coming from the electric mobility plan. And just for background, in reading this, and I don't know if the Department of Transportation was involved in the estimating, but the electric mobility plan does have estimated 550,000 for an electric circulator bus. And then $50,000 for 2 electric 6-passenger vans, which is, I guess, is a separate issue. So, okay.
Yeah, the $550,000 at that time came from the department. If you remember, back in June 2021, when we did the presentation on transitioning to zero-emission vehicles, we did identify State of Georgia contract that has these electric buses, the same ones. At that time, the price was $550,000 a piece. Currently, that new bus is close to $800,000. So since we wrote that one, things have changed dramatically, just like MIT came here about the increases in cost of everything here. So what we are seeing here now is a guaranteed price, the $753,523, based upon the state of Washington existing contract. The prices on this particular contract have not expired yet. So we need to move quicker to place the order to avoid another increase in the price of the vehicle.
Yeah, that's what we're dealing with ultimately is the escalation in inflation. Director Dickinson, none of these grants, the ARPA grant and the large urban capital grant, that's separate than what did we have in that doesn't interface with the electric mobility project at all, correct?
Correct.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but we can use them. We can use any capital grant that we have, whether it's for clean diesel or any other vehicle. If the city decide to use the money to buy electric bus, we can add more to that. And that's exactly what we are doing right here with respect to the $308,000 for the clean diesel bus, where we are asking to add the $250 from the county and additional $258,000 from the city. So despite the fact that it's for transit, we can add to that and buy whatever that we need if the city desire is to get electric buses.
Sure, yeah. So we can keep it in the electric mobility project.
Exactly.
Keyword electric. And that bucket of money is hopefully being supported by county, state, whatever. And then it will then be transferred as necessary to transportation for a purchase upfront, or in the best interest of buying now.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. And you explained to me offline basically why too, just so that they can run in tandem, et cetera. Do you have anything else to add to this discussion, the new director of transportation?
No, I think we're good. I think we're.
Okay, all right. You're good?
Yep, then.
Okay.
As long as I get the money.
Madam Chair, I do have another question.
Yeah.
It appears that we are piggybacking on a Washington State contract.
Yeah.
How did that come about? We seem to have gone far to get a partner in this.
Yeah, state government typically will have statewide cooperative purchasing agreement. And so far as that contract meets FTA requirements, we can piggyback on that using the FTA rules. We have already, it's far because the state of Georgia contract has expired, so we cannot buy off that contract. So we did a search out to see what is out there. And currently, the state of Washington contract is the only one that has reasonable price for these buses. State of Mexico has it, but it's very expensive, the way that they wrote the contract. So we have already started the piggyback process. In fact, it's a lot, just like you are writing the specification. This time you don't have to write it, but we need to get the whole contract from state of Washington, the advertising, the DB, everything. And we have reviewed that. We sent it to M.MTA. They have reviewed that and concluded that that state of Washington contract meets FTA compliance requirements, and therefore we can piggyback on that. So we are almost done with that process. So what we need is the money So the ones who get a concurrence letter from M.MTA, we can cut the PO and send it to the manufacturer of the bus.
So let me be clear, MTA knows who's got open contract.
Exactly.
And they pair you up, or you pair yourself up with other agencies, municipalities, or whatever, that are seeking the same thing that you're seeking.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a difference in the delivery? I mean, you're talking about a contract in Washington State and a contract in Maryland. They're delivering to two different municipalities 2,000, 3,000 miles away.
No difference, because this company is based in Lancaster, California, the
It's what?
manufacturer.
The bus company's located in Lancaster, California, so it doesn't matter where you get the contract from, it's built in the same place.
Okay.
Lancaster, California, so the delivery of the contract is the same also. The bus company is in Lancaster, California. The contract, it doesn't matter where it comes from, it's built at the same place, and the delivery time is the same. The delivery time is also built in the contract of how many days and all that, so it doesn't matter where you get the contract from. It's like we buy stuff off the Houston-Galveston bid for the fire department, and it's still built at Pierce in Epton, Wisconsin. We're just using that contract. They already did the due process of going out and doing an RFP and everything for that. It just saves time.
Well, thank you, just for our knowledge, because this is interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Ready for a motion?
I do want to ask one question, and it might be off topic, but ultimately necessary. Who is accountable for the estimating or the electric Annapolis mobility plan? Again, looking at the future, we have an escalation inflation problem now. It looks like we've projected this electric mobility plan out towards 2023. So I'm just wondering who is responsible for reviewing that number for any potential exposure or escalation impact.
For transit-related stuff, we do. As I said earlier,
portion.
yeah,
Okay.
we do. For the electric neighborhood vehicle, actually, we also had an input because initially we worked with Mr. David Gerald. We look at what is out there and gave a price. Since that time, again, the price has increased. There is also another cost element in the plan for $450,000 for DC charges. That also came from us.
Okay.
We actually did contact a company that works with. We did actually contact the bus manufacturers of the electric buses. They put us in contact with companies that work with them to design and install the chargers. So we got actually price quote back in 2021, and that we use that number. Of course, I talked to them recently. That number has gone up, but we have not moved down on that part yet. The bus we are buying comes with a charger with 3 dispensers, which means that one charger can be used to charge 3 battery electric buses. So the actual charger is covered in this procurement.
Yeah.
So we do provide input so far as the transit components are concerned.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask, and again, this might be off topic, but I understand in the 2022 appropriation, for example, the $330,000. I don't know if you're following me, Jody. That was for a Swedish purchase of a Swedish water taxi or something.
Electric ferry.
Right.
I think planning and zoning did a lot of work in terms of the cost estimate. We also did research on that, and that is what we did receive at that time. Of course, things have changed over time. Eric Lehensky, actually in planning and zoning, the chief comprehensive, he actually worked on most of that together with another lady in, in public works. So the three departments actually are working on this 100% mobility
Yeah,
plan.
that's all I wanted to hear. It's a multi-department effort, and ultimately, the Director of Public Works is responsible. I just wanted to make sure, you know, as we're taking money away from it and putting it in your budget, that we have enough left over, et cetera, et cetera. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll recommend that we give a favorable recommendation to SA 1823.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Before I continue with those 20, SA 20, 19, sorry. Jody, can you, I should have done this before. We're taking money from capital reserve for a lot of these projects. Could you just have a little intermission here and summarize? I think it's on the top of our handout here. I think it's important that we go over this. What we have in front of us is a summary that I had asked for on where we are with the capital reserve, assuming all of these supplementary appropriations are passed using capital reserve money. So I just wanted you to walk us through that.
Yes, so anytime we come to you with an essay that's going to use funds from the capital reserve fund or the one-time reserve, we try to provide you with this, here's where the reserve is right now, because as we know where we thought it was going to be when we were working on the budget, we gave you totals then. We're now starting to close out FY22. We know what the balance is, and we continue to tap from the funds during the year. So we want to keep you up to date on where those balances are. And what you see here that Katie prepared is the projected balance of the capital reserve fund after FY22 close. And that presumes we have already recognized the items in FY23 that we programmed during that budget process. So this is higher than what you saw during the budget process because FY22 is turning out to be better than what we had projected when we were working on the budget. So after all of our initial FY23 uses of the capital reserve fund, we think we're going to have 5.2 million in the capital reserve fund. And so here we're showing you not only the essays that you've already approved this year, Cars Beach, the pumper fire truck, et cetera. We're also showing you what these supplemental appropriations before you are going to draw from the reserve. And the second table is the one-time monies and what the balances are projected to be, considering the uses that we programmed for 23, and the two essays that we considered so far this year to draw from that balance, to keep you abreast of what the balances are.
So it's sort of a fluid process, if you will, until we're basically audited, that we're dealing with numbers, and then you have to go through, I call it the compliance check, if you will, to make
We want to make sure you're not depleting the reserve below the level that you'd want to going into the next year's budget. So you have to keep this in mind.
So we're holding all of the required fund balances, and after that evaluation, it looks like we have a higher number in capital reserves.
Yes,
Fortunately, to accommodate these supplementary appropriations. So.
Yes, and this calculation that you see there presumes that we have set aside the 15% fund balance, unrestricted fund balance that we're required. That's taken off the top before we even look at these reserves.
Okay, and when is the final audit of 2022? It says unaudited, so.
Well, we're working with the auditors right now. We're in the process of drafting the fund financial statements and the ACFR, the annual comprehensive financial report, the book. So we're working on that simultaneously as the audit's going on. So we're hoping to have it done mid-December. We'll see. As you know, we're a little short-staffed, so we're trying to do it.
We'll ask you about that later. Okay, so let's continue on.
May I ask a question?
Sure, of
You
course.
raised this. Ms. Dickinson, can you tell us the difference between the capital reserve and the one-time reserve? I know the public isn't seeing this, and that's why.
Yes, so our fund balance policy requires that at the end of every year, we retain 15% and not touch it. Put it into an unrestricted fund balance and we leave it there. Anything on top of that 15%, we look at the balance, half of it goes into the capital reserve fund. The capital reserve fund is used for capital assets. It can be used for capital assets. The other half, we have to make sure that the budget stabilization fund is at its limit, meaning we would put half of the other half in the budget stabilization fund if it wasn't at its limit. This next year, we're going to be putting a little bit more in the budget stabilization fund, but once that reaches its cap, the rest has to go into the reserve for one-time uses, which means this leftover piece can only be used for items that we're only going to spend once, not for repeating operating costs.
And am I correct in thinking that the capital definition are projects that have a 20-year life expectancy, or did we change it to 30-year life expectancy?
So it would, any capital asset that would align with our capitalization threshold, which is, I'm not sure off the top of my head if it's 5 to 7 years. So we could use the capital reserve fund for vehicles, which don't typically have a 20-year life. We could use it for the 20-year assets. We could use it for assets that are going to last 30 years. You know, the roads, the sidewalks, those types of assets. We typically use it for roadways and sidewalks and some of the other capital projects that we have. What I would say is that we'd want to use it for capital assets that the city is going to own. So that's it.
Thank you. I just wanted that to be clear. I was looking back at Ms. Greco because I know she was probably part of the discussion when we were thinking about how to increase the life expectancy of some of our capital projects. But anyway, thank you.
Just to give you credit, I think, or the department head's credit, we seem to be doing better projections, it seems. Can you speak to that? Or better estimating so that our uncommitted costs, cover us, if you will?
If you're talking about the fact that FY22 is estimated to be better than what we had projected in the spring, as we're pulling the budget together, we start in February and March to get the budget, the proposed budget to you. So we're not even 3/4 of the way through the fiscal year. So we tend to be conservative on expenses, projecting that departments will spend most of their budget that they've been allotted. We do very careful calculations as to salaries and benefits, so we can project where that's going to end up. But for the rest of it, we tend to allow the departments that entire budget to spend. At the end of the year, you'll find that they don't always spend their entire budget, and any purchase orders that they have outstanding that didn't materialize in an order, they will most likely liquidate the purchase order. So all of those actions provide a better result at the end of the year. In addition, we're using that 3/4 of the year revenue estimates. We're looking at revenues coming in and we're trying to project where they're going to be. We try to be conservative with our projections so we don't over-project. We'd rather under-project revenues than over-project. And there were a few revenue sources that came in better than we had anticipated in the spring.
And it's all good, because looking at the
It's all
budget
good.
as a whole, you're
Yeah,
able-
and that has been the trend in the last 3 or 4 years, that we're a little bit better at year end than what we anticipated during the budget process.
And it's so that the public knows that this money is necessary eventually. It enables us to cover the escalation problem that we're seeing in these capital projects.
Yeah,
So
any of
that's how
these
it works.
types of things that pop up, like
Yeah.
we need to buy something that we didn't plan on buying, like we needed to pre-order the pumper fire truck because the order time is now extended 2 years. We hadn't intended to buy it this year. Those unexpected purchases also,
Yeah.
we can use these types of reserves for that if that's what the council wants to
Yeah.
use it for.
Yeah, it's exciting, at least for me, that government budgeting is, works that way. Anyways, okay, so we're on to SA, Ms. Greco, it's yours. It's 19. This is related to traffic signal rehabilitation. And right now, we have $508,500 appropriated for this year, for 2023, and you're asking for an additional $450,000, which is basically double. So please explain.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Greco, and I'm with the Department of Public Works, Engineering, and Construction, and I'm a capital projects manager. The additional cost that we're requesting is due to the Church Circle traffic signal replacement project. It's a capital project. It went out to bid in July. The engineer's estimate for that project just prior to going to bid was $875,000 and was within our budget. The bid that we received, we only received a single bid from Scott Duncan Incorporated. That came in originally at $1.73 million. We spent the next couple of months negotiating with them, trying to understand their costs and to see if we could reduce anything. At the end of that negotiation period, we requested a best and final offer from Scott Duncan. They were able to bring their costs down only $91,000. So we have a final bid price of $1.65 million, yielding a shortfall. In addition to the bid, we have additional costs associated with the project. The project is located in Church Circle, which is the heart of the historic district. We're required to have archaeological monitoring. We will need part-time inspection services, and we also have cost to BG&E, a contract with BG&E to provide service to the new signals. And so those additional costs, including a small 2% contingency, because we're still seeing escalating prices, we determined we have a shortfall of just under $450,000.
What project is this, Jody? I can't find it. In
In the CIP book, it's 45, page 45. I just got to it myself. Traffic signalization.
Traffic
Okay,
signal
so-
rehabilitation.
Oh, there it is,
Yes.
page 42, okay. Let
Sorry.
me just get my bearings here. So
Sure.
you're saying the whole
That-
ad is because of Church Circle?
Yes, so the capital project itself started, it covers, we did a citywide assessment of all the signalized intersections that the city owns. That was completed in 2020. And at that time, the result of that citywide assessment was to look at the condition of all of our infrastructure and then prioritize either replacement or upgrade projects. At that time, in May of 2020, Church Circle was determined to be the highest priority, and it was so significantly deteriorated. The recommendation by the structural engineer was that it be replaced within 1 year. We immediately went into getting it designed and out to bid, and here we are 2 years later, and it's really imperative that it be completed. We've actually considered taking a pole down because some of the holes are increasing in size.
Is there any consideration on postponing the project in light of this having one bidder? Do you think things will ease up, or is it best to bite the bullet now?
We felt that with the continuing escalating prices, but probably more importantly, the poor condition of the poles, and we're already a year beyond the engineer's recommendation to replace it within 1 year, we feel it's important to go forward with the project with the current pricing. We don't anticipate it to go down. As a matter of fact, the concrete prices, they had 3 increases before they put in their bid in July. They had a subsequent increase in October and expect another one in January. The cost of the signal poles, we have 21 signal poles. Those prices have increased since they gave us their bid in July, and their best and final offer, which we received last month, the prices were only good through the end of October. So it could be that they've even gone up a bit more as well.
Just because it's such a specialized thing, there's one bidder, there's no other bidders that focus on traffic resignalization? It's that much in demand nationwide?
Yes, there aren't a lot of companies. This particular contractor is the sole contractor for all of Anne Arundel County. They have an on-call contract with them. They also provide services for Howard County, and there aren't a lot of companies, so.
I guess it's not much of a question. This sounds like it's something we need to take care of without any delay. I mean, I can imagine if there's a chance that the lights will fail.
That's correct, yes.
And what would happen to the city, especially the historic district, if our lights fail? So that's what it boils down to for me.
And you have to understand, too, the project itself, we've allowed a 1-year duration. The contractor has indicated that they feel they could complete it in 9 months, but the existing infrastructure has to remain in place during the construction of the whole new system. That has to become up and operable, and then they remove the old system. So we're really talking another year that, they'll be sitting in place, these significantly deteriorated poles.
So, Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation to SA 1923. Yeah.
Go ahead. And I guess my question is, it's the only circle in the area that has lights? And can you give some history on that, why that is, and why there's a no turn on red on parts coming off of Cathedral? I mean, to me, I understand the brevity of the situation, but I also would love to hear why we have a circle with lights. And
so this isn't a roundabout, it's a traffic circle, and it's the intersection of 4 major roadways into or out of there's actually more, but there's 4 signalized intersections. Northwest Street, which is a primary road into the city, as well as West Street. And then you have Duke of Gloucester and Main Street. And so it accommodates a lot of traffic. It's signalized to allow pedestrians to cross into the center, which is a church and is well attended, and it's a historic landmark. And these signals have been in place for 35 years, and there were signals prior to that. So these signals were actually a replacement for signals that were in place. I'm not sure when the original signals went in, but it's been over 35 years that the current infrastructure has been in place. So it's always been a signalized circle.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this has a little bit of a history. It got a little bit, Ms. Greco and I went back and forth on this because I just thought it was a lot of money, and now even double. And, why couldn't they just be repaired? But there's answers to that. And I guess it did eventually go through HPC? Is that
Yes,
true?
yes.
Yeah. But yeah, from New England, we had rotaries that you just zipped around without light signals, so it's a tough one to swallow.
Well, let me ask you, and this is from someone who spent many, many summers in Boston. They don't have pedestrians walking on those circles as we do. And so I think that's a consideration that we can't ignore. It's in the heart of the historic district, and we encourage people to walk. And so, yeah, they're going to want to get over to the church and the historical significance of it. So I think we have to take that into consideration also.
In addition to crossing all of these major roadways into the city, pedestrians would need to have the right of way to cross West Street, Northwest Street. We have a lot of pedestrian generators. You have the legislature, you've got the courthouse, the visitor center, all around Church Circle there. So,
And that's what I understand is a bit of the cost is it's almost like a compounded thing. You can't just put a light. You have to put in generators to service the lights and all that underground work. And you have to do curb remediation for the handicap. I mean, things have progressed as far as the technology. So, yeah.
And Madam Chair, if you've ever gotten behind a tourist on a circle,
Oh, God help us.
they can't get off. Everybody hasn't had the New England experience with rotaries, is what they call them. There are people who get on our circles and can't get off. So
Now, Regina, be quiet about me passing you the other day. Let me just ask what I said earlier. Are we, so you're covering the financial impact over the life of this project, you feel, correct?
yes.
And then as far as next year, will you do a reevaluation as we asked MIT? I mean, it seems like this might be a factor in subsequent work.
Yes, well, as I said, we have a list of prioritized intersections, and then we have our annual budget. So to be honest, the next highest priority intersections all fall within the historic district, and they're all will probably be more expensive. They're total replacements. We're actually looking at possibly just maybe doing upgrades to some others to stay within our budget for the next year. So to accommodate, we have a lot of construction going on downtown, and so we're very cognizant of that as well. And we have hurdles with the Historic Preservation Commission. So we want to work through those things first.
Thank you. Motion?
I made a motion.
Oh, you did finish it. Okay.
Second.
All in favor of the favorable recommendation signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you for your patience. Thank
Welcome.
you.
Thank you.
Now, may I ask when we're going to get a basketball court?
Oh, that's fine.
Mike, the basketball court in Ward 4, I'm going to just keep reminding us, that's now like 18 months overdue. Thank you.
I'm on the mic now. We have a hard copy of, thank you. Thank you. Do my colleagues have this? Yes. SA 21, coming from one-time use. This is Choice Neighborhood Initiative Grant. Yes, timely. Who's here to speak to it? Yes, come on up. No cash prizes. This one is important.
Good morning, everyone. Teresa Wellman, Planning and Zoning, Community Development Office.
Good morning.
Morning.
Oh, yeah. So could you just explain this total appropriation and why it needs to be reappropriated? There seems to be an accounting thing here that's unclear. What does this exactly do?
Well, basically, it was appropriated last year, but we didn't have expenses. It's a 2-year program. So it was appropriated in the first year, but we didn't have expenses in the first year because of the timing. We actually started generating most of our expenses in the beginning of this fiscal year. So it just needs to roll over.
Right, because we approved it in a supplemental appropriation last year, correct? We approved it in a previous supplemental appropriation, but the money wasn't spent.
Correct.
So we have to repurpose it or whatever the word is now.
We do have expenses now.
Okay. Is this a matching, is there a matching?
Yes, it's a matching requirement of the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative, the application that the city put in partnership with the Housing Authority. And it was a 50-50 match, and it was approved by the City Council, Resolution R-1721.
Okay, so it's a 50-50 match,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the,
This is ours. This is our
is it.
portion.
okay. Director Dickinson, did you want to add anything?
No, I was just confirming that it didn't roll forward. We added it last year, but we added it after we had already produced the budget, the proposed budget. So it wasn't in the rest of the grants that we typically roll forward into the following year. So it got added in that last quarter. And then it didn't get spent, so now we need to reappropriate it.
So for document control, do you void that supplementary appropriation from last year?
No, it was added to the budget, but it wasn't spent.
Oh, gotcha.
In fact, it's part of the savings that we saw, that we just talked about.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, this is part of the reason why we have these kind of savings at the end of the year.
I get it. So got the, yeah, past the cutoff. Any questions?
I do have a question. Ms. Wellman, what's the total amount of the Choice Neighborhood Program grant?
Because the total amount of the Choice Neighborhood Program is, there was, the grant itself is $450,000 that we received. And the match is $400,000. So that's basically add the two together. I'm looking at, and that doesn't account for the in-kind. So then you add the in-kind contribution, which totals $1.4 million.
And is that over a multi-year period?
2-year period. We have a 2-year period to come up with a transformation plan for Eastport Terrace and Harbor House.
Okay.
And then that transformation plan then generates, is our plan for redoing those two properties.
So this 50% match is a one-time cost for us. Is there a
For the
cost-
planning,
I'm sorry?
for the planning grant, yes.
Okay, so does HACA have a requirement?
Yes, they had to put in 50% also.
They had a 50% match also. Okay. All right, thank you.
How far does it take us? Is it just the planning, or is
The
it?
450 takes us just to the planning, yes.
Okay.
The redevelopment will be millions.
I didn't know if
Millions of dollars.
so no design or any, it just stops at planning. And then the next step would be what?
Well, it will be this coming, I think it's next week, we're putting together charrette to do for the neighborhood, to participate in doing the planning. And then as we go on, we will hire a developer. And at the end of that period, at the end of the two-year period, we have to have a transformation plan. Basically, it'd be a concept plan. And then we would go into actually doing the redevelopment.
I have another follow-up question, if you don't mind. After the planning phase of this grant, is there a large chunk of money that comes that will still have to be matched by the city?
I can't really answer that question because I'm not really sure how the financing works on the construction end. Typically, you'll see when you're developing affordable housing, things like requests for pilots and that type of thing. Or requests for, if there's land available as a contribution. So there's about $50 million available through HUD, which will probably finance part of it. And then the rest of it will have to come through all of the other programs, which all have different requirements. So it's really hard to answer that question.
So will the city be one of those other avenues? Will there still be a requirement for some sort of a match from the city?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
It'll all be programmatic based on the programs. So like I said, there might be a request for a pilot.
Yeah.
That type of,
Other kinds.
yeah.
All right.
As far as cash goes, I don't know. At this
I'm
point.
curious.
Will
when
we have an will we have an opportunity to see the plan before it's actually submitted?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Everything's on the website, Eastport CNI.
Okay.
You know, we've been putting all that stuff, and Mitchell's been sending out a lot of information to everybody, and there's all kinds of PowerPoint presentations and everything that's available. So anything that you'd like to see, let me know, and I can get it for you if it's not on our website.
Just for information, I don't,
Right.
I like the idea of the charrettes and having the
Oh,
community.
it's been really, I have to say, it's going really well. Really well. There's a lot of participation by the residents. There's a lot of participation by the neighborhood. Eric held the neighborhood task force meeting last night. There were probably maybe 30 or so people involved. So it's going very well so far.
Well, that's good. My immediate frame of reference, very different but similar, is when HACA did what's now Wilborn Estates, and there were a number of charrettes with the community to get their input on the new development, and I think that was greatly beneficial and appreciated.
Right, right. And this process will have the same thing. There's already been a community survey. There was a survey of the residents, and there was a survey of the community. We have all the results of those surveys if you're interested. So there's been a lot of participation from the community with the consultant, and with the housing authority, and with the city. So.
Well, thank you for giving us this opportunity to ask you the question.
Oh, you're welcome. Anything you need about CNI, let me know, and I'll get it to you.
CNI.
Just real quickly, that's where the money is going towards, like these surveys and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's. I think I put on here things like communications.
Yeah.
Like we're doing the communications because we have a communications group. Ours will go to some of the environmental things. Financing and phasing plan, and then all the reports that we have to give to HUD.
So part of that then will be, an outcome of this will be the development of the financial structure to rebuild. That's okay. I'm good.
So I just have a quick clarification because I like to take notes and I just want to make sure that my notes make sense. So you said the total amount is $450,000
For the grant.
for the grants. And you mentioned in kind at 1.4.
Both the housing authority and the city, we figured out the in-kind contribution is $456,000. About 144 of that is in kind from the city, and 300 and some.
144,000, not million.
Right.
Like I said, I was trying to figure out where the 1.4 million came in.
Well, when you total up the grant, the cash, and the in kind.
We don't have that backup, but will you have it for the council?
I thought I didn't.
Oh, it's an email? Oh, okay.
It looks like this.
Okay. Yeah, it's probably attached to the supplemental appropriation when she emailed it. Sorry about that.
I think it would be helpful if we get these things, these explanations.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, because we don't know the, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Nice seeing everybody.
Yeah, you too. Yeah.
Thank
Working
you.
from home a lot, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, well, you know where you
It's
are.
get so much more done, really.
Yeah.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Madam Chair, I'll recommend a favorable recommendation for SA 2123. I see Mr.
That's a motion. Remove that.
Excuse me?
You have to make a motion, not a recommendation.
I have a motion for a favorable recommendation. I thought that's what you said.
What have I been doing all day? Okay. All right, thank you. Oh, whatever he said.
Yeah, that's okay. I adjourned the meeting.
Second.
I adjourned the meeting in the first 30 seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All
Okay,
right.
we're on to resolutions.
Ordinances.
Ordinances, I'm trying to go ahead here, yeah, okay. 031-22, oh, actually, I thought that's why Teresa was here. Okay, 031-22, Revenue and Finance, for the purpose of requiring that all recipients of city community grants have proof of nonprofit status, clarifying definitions, adding acceptable proof, expanding requirements of grantees, and generally dealing with community grant allocations. This is sponsored by the
And me.
mayor and everyone, a lot of people. But Karma, I know you were the impetus behind this from the finance committee review of the budget.
I will say that. In review of the budget back in April and May, it was very clear that there is not a clearly defined set of criteria for our grants. And I had asked for a review of the grant procedures and the program itself. And so this ordinance does that. It brings into, so it's very transparent. It brings into light all of the details that are needed for an organization to apply for a grant. And it would also, I believe, one of the things I'd asked for was some outreach to community organizations to let them know that these grants are available. So outreach and education is also included in it.
Okay. Does it affect 6.16.070? It's just 6.16.060, correct? Right. The reason I ask is the requirement for quarterly reports. Does that remain intact? It's a lazy question on my part. That section of the code, I think it does remain intact. This looks like it changes 6.16.060 only. Yeah, so that requirement remains.
Yes.
Which might give me the opportunity to ask, did we receive quarterly reports for third quarter?
I think we can ask, do we receive the quarterly reports from the recipients of the community grants? Yeah, I'm sorry. Ms.
So at this point, the process used to be managed by the assistant city manager, and for the past few months, my assistant finance director has been trying to take on that duty. And I don't know if all the reports have been filed. I know that at the end of October, she was getting ready to send out payments for the community grants for the first payment. So I presume if they sent their report, they will be getting their check. So I know that she's working on that process, but details behind which ones are filed and not, she would have to answer.
Oh, that's a good process, so they don't get paid until they receive.
Yeah, that's part of they submit what they're supposed to submit, then we review it and then issue part of the payment, and then the next payment is remitted later on. I think it's in the winter, we send the second payment. I'm not sure of the timing of that one. Like I said, she's taken it on and made great strides in organizing it. and regulating it and trying to make it a simpler process for us, since it's a big workload, especially since she's working on the financials, so.
Thank you. Questions?
I'm afraid I'm just seeing this for the first time, so I'm not sure I have all of my questions at the moment. But my first question goes to the very end of the ordinance, page 3. Grant recommendations. The grant committee shall provide its recommendations to the finance committee for consideration as part of the annual budget process. I'm not clear on what's different here. What are we doing differently than what was the original language?
Is it better?
Is it we're changing the title, in which case it's not formatted quite like?
Is it wording? Sir, Michael Lyles.
Good afternoon, City Attorney Mike Lyles. Just reformatting to make it easier to read. We didn't change the substance of the language.
Okay, so it doesn't change anything. It's just for...
It's to comport with the consistency in the drafting that we're undertaking throughout the code as we make changes.
So does that mean you're changing the title of that letter F? Because in the original language, there's a title, and then beneath the title is an explanation. Yeah.
Yes, we are changing the title that's associated with that paragraph F there, and changing the format so that it comports with the legislative drafting manual, and consistent with other changes we make throughout the code as they come to us.
I'm looking for the consistency here. Letter F will now not have a title, or it will have a title, and it has a subsection.
I got it. It has a title. Grant recommendations
is the title.
And it has a period after it. And then it explains what it is. In the previous formatting, there was a title, line, a space, and then it explained what it did. But that's not proper legislative drafting format. So we changed it so that the title is the first 2 words, followed by a period, and then the explanation of what it does in that paragraph.
So my question is this consistent throughout? You're changing the whole format. So, and I think we need to know what the rules are if we're changing the formats of our legislation. But
well, the rules are set forth in the Maryland Legislative Drafting Manual, which haven't been followed by the city, and we're trying to follow them more consistently as we change things upon your request.
Okay, I'm just asking that we be aware of what these changes are, so we don't ask these questions.
Well, we're changing. We're adopting the standard format in the state of Maryland, and we're doing it as the requests for modifications to the code come. They're not substantive changes. They're just how the code is laid out more so than anything.
Okay, I understand that. Is the state of Maryland's requirement, are they requirements or are they options for formatting?
It's not a requirement, it's a guide.
Okay, so we can do it the way we've always done it if we prefer to do it that way, or we can adopt their guide.
Well, we have been tasked with putting your ideas as a council in the code. In addition to that tasking is the way things are done and coming up with a way of formatting that is more akin to how the state of Maryland provides in their legislative drafting manual.
So under whose direction are you doing all of this?
My own direction.
Okay, so if the council has a different desire, we need to make that known, I assume.
Exactly. If you want to have a different formatting, different from the Maryland Legislative Drafting Manual, we would be happy to do that.
I think the confusion becomes when we're starting to feel like all of what we've done is not right. And that's not the case. It's different from an option that you're choosing to use, but it's not an incorrect format. So our choice to have a title, which is highlighted, followed by a description of that title, is okay. It may not be the state's format, the state's guide, but it's what has been working in our documents for forever, successfully, I might add.
Well, the code has different formats throughout, depending on who was in my office. And so there has been no consistency, and we are trying to generate a consistent pattern of drafting. And what we look to is the prevailing guide in the state of Maryland to kind of align our pattern of consistency, because there was no one to tell us which pattern of formatting was right or best. So we decided to look to the prevailing guide.
So it feels like the assumption is that the way it has been done, even though there's a variety of ways, the way that it has been done is not the preferred way for the city, and we should adopt the state. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I think that is a non sequitur. The way that it has been done is inconsistent. There's an inconsistent pattern to drafting throughout the code. So to say that something has been done doesn't quite link up with the reality, because it's been done a variety of ways, and we're just trying to assert one particular way to do it. And we found that the guide, the Maryland Legislative Drafting Manual, is a guide that we can rely on consistently, so that whoever's in this seat, you don't have to rely on history or what's been done. You can look at the drafting manual, because it sets a standard.
Well, I guess my question is, and I don't want to belabor this, because I know others on the council do want to belabor this point. I'm not clear on why we wouldn't select one format that is already in use and redo the portions of the code that are not consistent with that format, instead of bringing a totally different format.
Well, this format is also used in the code as well.
Okay, well, whichever is the prevailing one. But taking away our titles is not the prevailing way that we've done business.
Well, we're not taking away the title.
Well, yeah, you have. Just looking at this example, the whole thing is the title now. Just looking at the example that I was citing, the whole thing is the title. Same thing it looks like on page 1 under definitions. But anyway, that doesn't speak to the topic of this ordinance. Ms. Alderwoman O'Neill, were there specific things that you wanted to accomplish in this legislation?
Yes. Transparency is one.
Transparency as far as reporting, functions of the nonprofit, in what respect?
It's historically been many of the same nonprofits over and over again receiving funds, with little change in new nonprofits. And I don't believe that because somebody has received funds for 15, 20, 25 years, that they should automatically be considered for funds. It should be written in the code that it's for nonprofits that are providing services that the city is not able to provide. And that historically, perhaps history should not be one of the criteria for receiving a grant.
Then I think there is some gross misunderstanding, because we have not awarded grants just because. There have been years of service to the city, which is why these grants are important to us. So to think or to to believe that grantees are given the funding just because it's not accurate. And I can speak from personal experience because you know how involved I am with the community grants. Every grantor, every grantee, whatever, the person who's receiving the grant, has made significant contributions and continue to do so. What I'm hearing you say is we should give new people an opportunity just because.
No.
And well, and I agree, we accept new people all the time. And one of the grants that I think you're concerned about has received grant funding for at least the last 2 years, if I'm remembering correctly, maybe not the large amounts. And there is a record of organizations such as the Community Action Agency, Maryland Hall, the Lighthouse Shelter, and other longstanding institutions in our city who have gotten considerably more support than we're able to give them now. You know, the Lighthouse Shelter received several hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maryland Hall, the same. And the Community Action Agency, the Annapolis Youth Services Bureau, when I came on the council, was getting $100,000 from the city because of the services they provide to the city. So I would like for us to be clear, there's a misperception, if that is the belief, that they only get funding because they've been getting funding. That is furthest from the truth. And so I would hope that this resolution does not perpetuate that misinformation. And yeah, I'm gonna be, take priority over defending the nonprofits, all of them, and what they have been able to do. There has not been lack of transparency in any of the grants that we've given. And we have seemed to have ignored the fact that the person who handled those grants and who followed up and who made annual multi-visits during the course of the year, first was removed from that position by a previous mayor. The most recent person was removed from that position by the city manager. And in both cases, those voids were never filled. And it sounds like we're blaming the nonprofits because there wasn't any follow-up on our part.
There's no blame. I don't believe this is blame. I believe it's an open, transparent system to review and to make sure that everybody is on an even playing field.
Well, and I have no problem with that because I know that all the organizations can stand up to that scrutiny. What I would like for us to add to this is funding for a staff person to make sure that this is done, to make sure that the annual reports come in, that the site visits take place, and that they are living up to what they committed to doing in their grant request. So would you be open to amending this legislation to speak to who's going to take care? I know the two people in the room who...
Because we discussed this, I know it was a big issue of ours during our review of the budget on who is going to be administering this, and I thought there was some person in the finance department that does this.
That's where it used to be. Ms. Dickinson just said her assistant right now is...
That's correct. Sorry, Katie Conley, budget manager. Right now, our assistant finance director is running the show for community grants. I don't know if that's going to stay once city manager is able to fill the assistant city manager role. I'm not sure if that would go back because previously it was housed there.
And originally, this was in the finance department. No, originally this was in the mayor's department, mayor's office. and then it was in the finance department. And now it's back into the finance department. Then it went back to it went to the city manager, and now back in the finance department. So it's been in both departments. Well, both being the mayor's office and finance department.
Looking at the job description for the assistant city manager, that's out there, but I don't see it specifically on what his, it might be in here, but it's too much to read.
Well, I would like for it to be somewhere.
Yeah.
And if we have to say in this ordinance, it should be in the city manager's office, I think we should have some discussion with the city manager.
Oh, not in the mic. Yeah. Yeah, I just said that I have the assistant city manager position on my screen that's out there to be filled, and I'm looking to see if one of the responsibilities was overseeing the grants, but it's a long list.
And right now, I thought it was in the Department of Community Caring.
Well, would you like to
No.
suggest an amendment to, I mean, we can't add a position here, but we can suggest that.
Well, we can add a position and to indicate that it would be as of as the next budget. I mean, if we pass a resolution and add a position, we can add that position in the 24 budget.
And let's make that subject to Michael Malinoff's review. Should I ask Director Dickinson if she knows anything about whether or not
Are you saying now you want to add a position specifically for community grants?
if it's not covered,
So right now, Jody and I mentioned that it's our assistant finance director is
handling it, correct?
right.
Right.
Previously, it was assistant city manager.
Okay.
Jody can speak on if she even knows if it's going to move back once that assistant city manager position is filled.
I don't know if you know whether or not it's in the new assistant city manager position, but
I have mentioned this to the city manager, that I would hope that the new assistant city manager will take that back. Aside from the staff limitation.
one of the part of the job description is serves as the chair of the city's grants committee and oversees the approval and reporting process for grants.
Part of title of what?
It's in the job description online.
Job description of what?
For assistant city manager on the city website.
Yeah. So that, and the previous assistant city manager took that over and was handling the process of the grants. So I'm hoping it goes back there.
Well, if it's in the job description, I think we can assume that that's where it's going to be.
So that's what I'm hoping. I don't make that final decision, but that's what I'm hoping. Not just a resource issue, but the finance department facilitates programs. We shouldn't be involved in the processing of programs, if you know what I mean, making programmatic decisions and stuff like that. So I believe that that's not our role. Our role is to facilitate other departments' programs. So that gets us monitoring and tracking those and ordering payments for community grants is something that should be handled by a department that's familiar with community grants and their uses.
So that sounds like the Office of Community Caring.
Yeah. So
And it's been all over the map. I mean, it's been out of the mayor's office.
When we
before,
first when we first put it in the office of the assistant city manager, there wasn't an Office of Community Services. But whether or not they have the capacity to take it on or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
Both our assistant finance director and community services and the assistant manager may be involved in the committee that decides how the monies get apportioned. But as far as the actual handling of the program and ordering the payments to be made, and monitoring the reports that come in and evaluating the reports for adequacy, that's not a finance role.
Right.
So that's my position on that, and I'm hoping it moves back over.
Well, I am comfortable with saying that this will be managed out of the city manager's office. And if he feels that it should be in a different place, by the time we get to the budget process, he can put it wherever he wants it, wherever it needs to be. But I think we should say who's responsible for this. So either I'll make a motion that we postpone it until we can amend it, or I will make a feeble attempt to amend it now, but I'm not ready to do that. So I'd make a motion that we postpone action.
I have just one question. Wasn't part of the, because I know I'm a co-sponsor, wasn't one of the objectives of this was to clarify the church-based institutions and that, make sure that that doesn't come up again? Isn't that?
That is in the legislation.
That is part of it.
Yeah. And that was important, but, so the result of this, Alderwoman O'Neill, is an inequitable process is your objective. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, the motion on the floor, do I have a second on the motion to postpone?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion,
Madam Chair, I would like the city attorney to look at, for the next time when we speak to this, the faith-based applicants. Because I thought you had said that they are not eligible for grants. But on page 3, letter E, it says they are eligible, just like any other organization. So are we going to just listen to your advice and ignore it? Or, I don't mean it like that. But
Well, I never said that the religious or the faith-based organizations were ineligible. The point I made in several council meetings was that there is a constitutional requirement that any government funds going to faith-based institutions are not to be clouded with the sectarian or the religious purposes or impeded by religious purposes. And if money is going to a religious organization, the government here, the city, is constitutionally required to ensure that the money is not used for religious purposes in the providing of the services. And in the grant application, there was no consideration of that particular requirement.
So if we put an addendum on, or a comment at the beginning of the application to say that faith-based organizations are not eligible who are planning to use grant funding to perpetuate religious beliefs, practices, etc.
I think it says.
Well, that's what this ordinance says.
Number 2.
It says,
Okay,
it just means that they cannot discriminate in the use of their funds on the basis of religion.
I guess I'm thinking about the funding that I got for community grant, for community adoptions. Okay, this, in my reading, says faith-based organizations are eligible.
Yes, they are eligible.
So I'm saying, should we put somewhat of a disclaimer to let them know up front that funding that they receive from the city cannot be used?
That's what we did in the code. That's how we wrote it.
Okay, but I'm saying, should that not also be on the application to begin with, so that they go in knowing? But we can.
Well, the application is a regulation or a policy that the executive or the administration can adopt if it wishes.
I understand that. I'm just trying to. Okay, I'm good.
The council doesn't decide how the executive executes the policy. You have, if the council passes this bill, the executive or administrative side of the government can decide how to create the application to make all of that apparent. Sure.
And the council can have input on that.
Some input, yes.
Well, that's all we need is some
Yes,
input.
and you have some input because you've laid the policy out.
Exactly.
And right.
So we can say how we foresee the policy moving forward.
But you must be careful because the legislature legislates, it does not execute. That's the way your government is set up. And so you give the policy in the ordinance, and you mandate that the executive side create the policy, the regulation, the policy, and the implementation of the policy that you've laid out in the code.
Thank you.
I think I can simplify at least my understanding of the way this is written is that you don't want to be discriminatory in the acceptance of applications. And that's the way I read it, that all faith-based applicants are eligible on the same basis to apply. But then you do say that the awards are consistent with federal law. And so am I putting words in your mouth as far as not trying to make the application process discriminatory in any sense, but still abiding by federal law when we give the grants?
Yes, that's basically it. The Supreme Court has, through decisions in the last several years, relaxed the First Amendment prohibition on government intermingling with religious and faith-based organizations in the provision of services. The last two main cases from the Supreme Court have said that governments can give money to faith-based organizations to carry out non-religious purposes. And so in advising the council, it's always best to make sure that there is no discrimination on either side, no discrimination against religious organizations, but also no discrimination by religious organizations to take taxpayer dollars and only give it to people and services that are pointed at a particular religion. And so this particular code section, the way we drafted it, allows the government to use taxpayer dollars to provide a wide array of services through various organizations, be they faith-based or not, but sets a uniform, non-discriminatory standard for the use of those funds, not based on religion.
All right, so for next meeting, we'll have clarification on the oversight of the grant process. And okay, so next is this is Mike Malinoff's not here to testify. He told me he was going to testify against this. It's a joke. It's 041-22. It requires staff reports and to put it in the code because it isn't, and it just for future city managers would like them to know that a staff report is required because we've been spoiled by having them.
Madam Chair, is the finance report, the financial fiscal impact note, also already in the code?
Well, my question is, why are we reviewing this?
Because if we're putting the staff report, which we already get, into the code, I would think we'd put the fiscal impact note.
Yeah, it's in there. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's my recollection it's in there, and and we have to have it delivered by before the public hearing on legislation. So that's what we try to do. I mean, we've missed it a couple times when things come up suddenly, but other than that, that's what we've been trying to do.
Yeah, this was based on, just from council meetings where we've asked for stuff that wasn't there. And one in particular was the second item, on fee waivers, we asked for a backup. And so this requires also I'm on page 2, so let me back up. One is basically asking for the city manager to submit a staff report and the finance director to submit a fiscal impact note on everything, ordinance, charter amendment, and resolution. And then the second is any resolution or ordinance waiving or reducing city fees shall be referred to the Finance Committee. And then, I'm not sure what lie on the table means, after which it shall be read the second time and final action taken.
Well, Madam Chair, my question was, should we be consistent and add fiscal impact note?
It's in there.
But I thought I heard Ms. Dickinson say it's already in the code. It's not in the code, it's in this ordinance.
I think the fiscal impact note is already in the code somewhere. I see you've put it in this legislation as well. I don't, Cynthia maybe will tell you where, because I don't have the code open right now, but I thought it was a requirement.
Oh, no,
So-
we're going to go into the discussion of formatting, because
No, we're not discussing formatting. I want to know if.
No, I think that's what it is. I think that on page 1 of 2, it's crossed out.
Right, what's crossed out, and Cynthia Reuter, policy analyst. In paragraph E, the cross out part, that is the original, what is in the code currently.
Mm-hmm.
The replacement divides the two, the paragraph is long and it deals with two different issues.
Mm-hmm.
In the revised version, it splits those two out into separate paragraphs.
So the question is the requirement of a fiscal impact note in the existing code?
It is, and it only the fiscal note is required by ordinance. The staff report is not.
That's what I'm asking. So I just want to know about the fiscal impact note. It's already in the budget. I mean, it's already in the code.
It's in there, but this legislation
Yeah.
crosses it out
Crosses
and
it out.
rewords it.
I got that.
Okay, yes.
But it's already in there. It's not needed in this legislation because it's already in the city code, correct?
Yes, but I think the attempt is to put them together in the same paragraph in the code so that they've crossed out what's there and then re-described it as we need to do a fiscal impact note and a staff report before the public hearing.
Yeah.
So is that the intent of the sponsors of this legislation?
Well, the original intent was the city manager report, but in so doing, from what Cynthia just explained, it was, she revised the wording to pull it out of this existing paragraph and itemize it separately in this legislation as item 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're right. This could get us into another discussion about formatting. I don't want to go there.
And I'm not getting in the middle of it because she's a former English teacher.
Well, it has nothing to do with that, but you know, it has everything to do with changing the voice of the council. That's my concern.
What is that Maryland law that you're using for our reference, what Mr. Lyles referred to in your rewrite of the code? Maryland.
User guide,
I mean,
he said.
It's the legislative manual.
Oh,
It is
a manual.
guide for how to write legislation for the state legislation.
Is your microphone on?
Okay. The manual is the state's guide for drafting legislation for the state lawmakers. And we're writing it the same way they're writing it, basically.
Okay.
That does not say that the way our previous attorneys have done it was incorrect or inaccurate. It's different.
Inconsistent is what I'm gathering.
Well,
He said that because we've had several different attorneys who have allowed staff to do different things. So we're being consistent. My question is, why can't we pick a format that we're using instead of trying to redo it all in a new format?
The code is written in many different ways. Most of the code is written in most of the code that's recent, the past few years, is in the legislative manual style. So we are following a lot of what's already in the code, just not all of it is.
Okay.
And we're trying to write it in easy to read sentences, less legalese, for better understanding for people?
Well, I couldn't agree more that not reducing, but separating out staff reports from financial fiscal impact notes makes sense. So if that's the primary purpose, that's fine.
Yeah, get it all
I mean,
in there.
I just simply asked, wasn't one of those things already in there, in other places in the code?
And
But
you're correct, yeah. Okay. All right. Maybe we'll suggest a work session where the law office talks to us about the path forward on revising the code, because that's a big task there.
So can I make a motion to give a favorable
That's where we were, right? Thank you.
and I'll second it.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Bonds, 046-22. This is one more series of bonds, and yeah, you are best to explain this, Jody, on this second, I don't know how to say it, the second bond sale, if you will.
So this is every year in July, we come to you with a bond ordinance, and that bond ordinance allows us to sell bonds, incur debt to do the capital projects. This second bond ordinance is to allow an additional authority so that we can refinance the subdebt related to the P3 Hillman Garage project and save quite a bit of debt service over the course of that debt. And in addition, there's an additional $500,000 of bond authority for the purchase of the property, towards the purchase of the property that's next to Cars Beach. And so this just gets that extra permission to issue debt for those purposes, because that was not included in the original bond ordinance.
Can you tell us what the debt payoff is, what interest rate? Is that what we're refinancing basically by selling these bonds?
Well, in the fiscal note, the combination.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at the staff report, yeah.
Yeah, there was a.
Actually, it's in the same. Yeah, it doesn't have,
It doesn't have, if you look there, it says the present value. Sorry, the present value savings over 30 years is estimated to range from 10.8 million to 26.7 million, depending on inflation. So if I recall, the total interest cost of the subdebt is somewhere north of 9%. Hopefully we can get closer to 5% with this sale. And as you know, because of the environment right now, and time is of the essence. So we're trying to get this refinanced as quickly as possible.
Does this impact the flow of the project? I know
No, it does not. In the agreement, in the concession agreement, we're allowed a period of time to refinance the subdebt if we so chose to. Within this construction call period, during the construction period, it will continue. Under whether or not we refinance it, the process will continue.
Good inclusion there. Questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. Ms. Dickinson, we have 500,000 for the acquisition of the land next to Cars Beach. Do we know the total of that acquisition and what other funds we're getting from elsewhere?
We don't yet. The council approved an additional appropriation to the project a couple weeks ago. This is, I would call it city seed money towards the purchase, and they thought it would make fundraising for the remainder of the purchase easier to say that the city would kicked in some of its own funding. So that was the reason for this initial, besides it'll allow us to do some of the due diligence that's required when you're trying to purchase a piece of property and get that process started. So I don't know I don't think anybody knows exactly what the purchase price is gonna be. They'll have to do some appraisals on the property to figure out what that is, what we're going to pay for it, and what the funding sources are.
I was at one of the fundraisers and had an opportunity to announce the well, it's not a contribution, the funding that we allocated from the city, and did have some questions along those lines from some of the contributors there. So hopefully we'll be able to generate the rest of the funds that way. So the other 25.5 million are items that are in our CIP?
So yes and no. So we're going to use those bonds to refinance the subdebt. The subdebt was used to provide funding for City Dock. So in that extent, yes, it's in the CIP. Mm-hmm. And we will, instead of using part of the concession payment for the City Dock, we're going to use part of these bonds for the construction of City Dock. So yes, it will help. It's going to replace some of the funding that's in City Dock right now. In addition, the proceeds are going to be used toward the Hillman Garage debt reserves that we're required to keep for Hillman Garage. And so that technically is not in our CIP. That project is being managed by Medco, who is the concessionaire. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying from a technical perspective, Hillman Garage capital project is not in our CIP. It's being managed by another party. City Dock is. And these bonds that I'm asking you for the authority for are going to address both projects.
Do we have a clear understanding of all of the funding for these projects yet?
Well, when you say City Dock, Hillman is not in the capital budget because of the private-public partnership, but the City Dock resiliency portion is. Okay. So this bond sale keeps the recession payment intact. That's the objective.
It keeps the funding that resulted from the concession payment intact. It's that I think we reviewed it at our meetings that we had. We did a PowerPoint presentation for you to show you that these proceeds are going to be used to issue 2 different series of bonds for different purposes. I'm sorry it's so complicated, but the whole deal was very complicated. So using the concession payment that resulted from the subdebt to pay off part of the subdebt, and then issuing our bonds to put it into the project to replace the concession payment that we pulled out. Because GO bonds, tax exempt, instead of the concession payment, are going to save us debt service over time. It's going to get us our lowest interest rate.
So can you walk us through trying to align the funding with the way it stands now? It would be helpful if you just go to page 20 for the City Dock Resilience and Revitalization Project, and then tell us how that funding allocation changes.
Okay.
Is that?
And when you did the, I think we have a replacement project page that may have gone along with something we gave you earlier, but I don't have it on hand. But you said page 20?
Well, the reason I asked is that
I know.
We all were briefed by the city manager independently on, and very simply, the funding allocation for City Dock is made up of 10 million from the state, 3.2 million from this congressional, whether that's Sarbanes or Ben Cardin or whatever, and then another 1.125 in that same category, and then 25 million of the concession. So that all adds up roughly to 40
Yes.
million.
So in looking at this page that's in your capital project
Yeah,
book,
yeah.
on page, I've got it on page 21. I thought you said 20, so I hope we're looking at the same thing.
20, yeah.
If you see there, we're still attempting to get the $19 million in grants. We already have an award of $10 million from the state.
Yep.
We already have, I think it was another 1.3 million that we're applying for some of the planning funds. Aside from that, we're still trying to get other grant funding to fill that difference. The second source you see there, the 22,268, that will be about $13 million less, and will be replaced with bonds on the top line of 13 million. So some of that concession payment will be pulled out, and we're going to put bonds in on the top line as a funding source. So the total doesn't change. It's just putting in bonds instead of the concession payment.
Where it will make more, I don't know how else to say it, will make more money. It will,
Because the only way that we can issue tax-exempt bonds is to apply it to a construction project. Otherwise, we'd have to sell those bonds as taxable, and the interest rate will go up a little bit. So to get the maximum savings, we were advised by bond counsel that we do it like this.
and then I guess it's a separate question on, that's a David Giles question on whether the $40 million is, I mean, we're hearing.
Yeah, how are we doing with the grants and trying to get other sources? Yes.
So can we get a document that shows total cost, total PPPs, total, I want the bottom line is what I'm trying to get to. Because I don't think, yeah, I don't think we know what City Dock is going to cost us or what Hillman Garage is going to cost us.
The construction of Hillman Garage has already been funded and has been managed by Medco. That will not cost us any additional funds.
But I thought I heard you say that we have costs to them. Do we not have any?
So some of the bonds, we were required to use some of the sub-debt to fund debt service reserves for the senior debt. There were two pieces of debt, the senior debt and the sub-debt. Some of the sub-debt was used to fund additional reserves for the senior debt. We do have to use our bonds now to fund those reserves. So yes, and that we do have to when we pay off the sub-debt, we're going to put our bond money into the debt service reserves instead.
So it is costing us.
Yes, for that portion. Yes, okay.
It is costing us. And that's what I think we would all like to see. What is it costing us? You know, our bonds, we're going to be paying these bonds off for 30 years.
Yes, and I can tell you that I could give you a detailed analysis, but as it boils down to the savings, when you take both pieces into consideration, the way the deal is structured now versus how it will, the debt service will pay over time under our proposed refinancing, we're going to save between $10.8 and $23 million over time.
And that's great. But what is it going to cost us? We know what we're going to save. Does that mean we're not?
Okay. So what is it going to cost you?
Is it not going to cost us anything? It's total savings?
No. I see what you're saying. So you want to know what Hillman and City Dock is going to cost us.
Well, not to interrupt.
Two separate.
Right, because Hillman, I know, I know that we have a guaranteed maximum price from Whiting Turner. You know, that's a number that they can't exceed without a substantial scope change. So there's really not much exposure, I would hope, in that chunk. the chunk that I think we're all concerned about is the total cost of City Dock. You know, we're throwing out $40 million, and to Alderwoman Finlayson's point, I don't know if we feel comfortable with that. Look at all the ads that came to us today on lack of, bidders and inflation and escalation. And then you also have to examine the what-if scenario. You know, I don't know what the bond market looks like other than, what I hear on television. I'm hopeful that this will be to our advantage. We have no choice, basically, because we have sort of this yucky deal where we have this secondary debt. That was one of the results of the negotiations. That was not in our favor. Is my mic not on? Oh.
No, I'm looking for the page number on the CIP.
Oh.
Sorry.
So I guess we do want a reevaluation of the total estimate for the project and the funding sources sort of finalized as best as possible. If we could have that for the next meeting. Anything else to add to that?
We've been getting really glossy, impressive PowerPoint presentations.
Oh, God help us, yeah.
But I want to know what the bottom line is. I'm sorry. I want to know what I'm leaving to the city of the residents to pay off over the next 30 years. And maybe it'll be acceptable that we've done the right thing, maybe not. We're going to have a brand new garage, we're going to have a brand new city dock, and will people be able to afford to live in the city of Annapolis because our taxes are so extremely high because we got to pay off all of these capital projects? That's what I want to know. I want to know the bottom line. I'm sorry. Bottom line. So Jody, I'm sorry, Ms. Dickinson, we're putting this all on you because there is a committee that did all this.
Yes, and there's other people that know far more about the actual project completion than I do, and the components and what it's going to cost, and what the funding sources that we've currently received or been promised total. So we can pull that together for you. My question is, you said something, you're saying City Dock, but Hillman, you asked about Hillman too. Do you want like total cost to the city of Hillman?
Might as well, yeah. If David could just come and report any updates to the numbers and any changes in assumed funding.
Okay.
Specifically the congressional level.
So we're in hopes that the city taxpayer won't have to pick up any of this cost.
Correct.
Because the money is being paid back with parking revenues, not with general fund tax revenue.
Right.
However, when you issue GO bonds, you're putting that backing on there, that if something happens to the parking revenues, we will pay the debt with the city's taxes. That's what that pledge means. But we feel, so as the way the deal is currently structured, parking revenues are projected to be more than enough over time to fund both projects. We're going to make the situation better by refinancing the subdebt.
We have given over much of our parking. We've given over the garage. We've given over half of the
District 1 and 2.
Districts 1 and 2.
For 30 years.
Right. And, looming out there is transit in my mind. We're going to be paying this off through the revenue that's generated through our new garage and all of our street parking. I don't know. I'm just speechless. Madam Chair, ask for what you need.
I do have one quick question. I had heard that the one problem of this is that parking garages, are not, sexy out there in the bond world, for lack of better words and stuff, but are these bonds in the same category? And we're putting them out there? Are they more attractive now because they're not specific to the garage, that they're more specific to City Dock? Do you know what I'm saying? That was like the whole that was what I understood was the problem in financing this, was that the market wasn't interested in parking garages.
Not that they're not interested, but they're being a little, Fogarty calls it bearish. They're being bearish about parking revenues. It's one of those things that can fluctuate if there's economic issues. As you know, during COVID, we had a downturn in our parking revenues. So, and that impacts the revenue flow in. We feel that the parking revenues that have been projected in this 30-year deal are very conservative. If we don't have an economic crisis of some kind that depletes the parking revenues, we should have enough to provide around 900 to $1 million to the city to help pay for transit. But remember, we also have the other garages and the other parking that's also providing funding for that purpose.
Waterfall payments.
Yes. So I don't think anybody knows exactly what the numbers are going to look like until the waterfall payments start coming to us. So we can see where we're at. But we're hopeful that we have enough parking revenue to cover the bonds over the 30 years.
Okay. All right, well, I'll entertain a motion for a favorable recommendation, because I guess we got to get these bonds going.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to give a favorable recommendation to, I don't even have it up, what's?
046.
046.
I'll second.
23.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All righty, last is this resolution for a fee correction, which apparently is some kind of a omission. But wow, it gets complicated. I guess it doesn't want us to charge too much, it would defeat the purpose if we overcharge an electrical permit to be more than the building permit. I'm gonna go with John Manassa on this one. But can you explain? Is anyone here to? No.
Well, may I ask, are we looking at page 2 where we're adding
where are you?
the language?
Yeah.
And it's capitalized, so it's new, and it's underlined, because I don't know why.
Yeah, because it
Why
wasn't there.
both?
Was that capitalized and underlined is necessary?
Well, I guess.
It depends upon
Does it depend?
the situation.
Okay.
Right. If it's new to the code, it doesn't need to be underlined. If it's an amendment, it needs to be underlined. Anything new is capital letters.
Can it be both new to the code and an amendment?
Depending upon where it is. This is a section that's already there, so it would be an amendment to that section.
So this is really well explained in the staff report, and it's basically saying that the description of the fee was omitted, and by putting the description back in, it will satisfy that fee structure so that it does not appear that somebody that's remodeling something is paying more than a new dwelling. So it's adding a description in where there was not a description.
Well, where does it
clarify.
describe, what's added here then? Is the permit fee, I just see an explanation that says, very logically, if one is, obviously if the electrical permit is higher than the fee for the new building in Schedule A, obviously the lower fee governs. I see that, but what are we talking about? Like, where is it? Do you think that's enough said here, or?
And the description is the underline. If the total permit fee above exceeds the comparable fee for a new building, the electrician may apply the lesser fee.
So that's basically what this does, is that clarification. It doesn't introduce a new fee. That fee
Correct.
has been there. Okay, so
basically what happened was 2 years ago, this line was in the fee schedule. And 2 years ago, when they put together the final document and sent it into Muning Code, that sentence got accidentally disappeared. And they realized the mistake this month and asked that the sentence be put back in. And that's what this does. So the underlying caps part is that one sentence being put back in between those two sections.
I'd like to make a motion to give a favorable recommendation to the council
I'll
for
second.
R 5722.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Alrighty. Was there one coming our way on the liquor license? Wasn't there some typo? That's what I thought this was going to be, but anyways, forget it. All right, it doesn't have any update. We have general discussion. That usually is an update from you, Jody, Director Dickinson, if you have anything else to add to the meeting that we need to know. How's your hiring going?
Okay, I mean, we're trying to work with a lot of different sources and figure out, temps. Do we work with a hiring agency and have to pay a fee? Do we get a temp to hire? Do we, because they can help find people for you, so it might be worth it. So we're kind of considering all options, and I am talking to some potential candidates for positions. I don't want to get too hopeful because what's happened, and in the meantime, one of our employees is moving out to transportation, so we're going to lose somebody else in a couple weeks to transportation, which, transportation is also short of staff, so I feel for them. So we're just trying to figure out how to work options internally as well to see if we can move people around internally and make it work with who we have if we don't end up filling from the outside. It's not getting better currently, but we are still looking at candidates, still setting up interviews, just trying to work our way through it.
I saw this commercial for this outfit called Indeed.
Indeed.com is a site that has a lot of job openings, and it's used by a lot of people these days. And Indeed actually pings our website and pulls all of our openings down and puts them on their site. So these jobs are on Indeed. In fact, a lot of our applicants see the advertisement through Indeed.
Actually, I've used Indeed to get summer jobs for kids in the past.
That's great that this city is.
May I ask, so which position are you talking about? Are we talking about the procurement officer? Are you hiring for the procurement officer?
We're still looking at applicants for the procurement officer. I've been looking at them as they come in. I mean, they have two people there right now, and we've got to get staffed fully till 3. I mean, we have a vacancy for an accounting manager, which is another high-level position that was critical to our year-end closure process and the general ledger reconciliations, that type of thing. We have a vacancy for a grants accountant, and the new budget analyst that you approved is still vacant. And one of our billing associates left for a job with the federal government, and we've just filled internally there. So this person that's filling the spot, her position is going to be vacant, and the one who's moving out to transportation is also going to create a vacancy. So I think we're at 5, 5 that we're trying to fill.
May I ask who's doing the procurement officer work?
The senior buyer is acting in that role.
You know how I feel about, putting work on already full plates. So that senior buyer is the procurement officer now, in addition to being the senior
Which
buyer.
is why we're still trying to hire for a procurement officer.
You could see when Brian talked that they took it upon themselves.
Yeah.
MIT.
And they will, because we have great employees, but it doesn't mean it's the fair and right thing to do. by our employees.
Yeah, it's not by choice.
Yeah. But I keep asking, what do we need to be doing to entice? Is it our salary scale? Is it our workload? Is it our reputation? What is it that's hindering the hiring of employees?
I can't tell you that answer. I think some of it is pay. I can tell you that everybody that I've considered for these positions, the accounting manager and the procurement officer, they are already making at the top end of our pay scale. And so, I can only offer them the top end of the pay scale. So, that's it. And that's unusual to have to offer that much on a pay scale. So we're just, the candidates that are out there are experienced and they are making more. So do I think some of it's a scale? Yes. But when I compare what we're paying to, for instance, the county, it doesn't look so out of whack. And the HR manager has compared our scale to other jurisdictions, and we're not out of whack. But we're trying to recruit, not just from governments. We're trying to recruit from, private industry, from the federal government, and I think that's where we're having problem competing.
Well, I can speak for myself in saying that if we need to be doing something different, we need to be doing something differently. If we need to change our salary scale, we need to change our salary scale.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to rely on you and our HR manager to tell us what we should be doing to make the hiring of our, necessary. Procurement art officer is vitally important, as are, all the other positions. But if we need to be giving you some additional tools, you need to tell us what you need and give us the chance to help.
Yes, and that's one thing we're working on now is at least a different scale for the non-represented employees. So we'll likely see something for that coming in the next budget round.
Is there any traction on the retirement benefits and privatizing them?
That's one thing we're starting as well. Looking into creating a different retirement option, and not the state plan, which requires a 10-year commitment.
Yeah. Please let me know anything I can do to work on that. I mean, just anecdotally, I know that we had a member of the audit committee. No, it was a woman that was interested in the audit committee, and then I asked her to look at our open positions instead, work for the city instead of being on the audit committee, and the retirement benefits was the deal breaker. So yeah, I mean, I'd really like to support you on that, and I know the Finance Advisory Commission has brought that up in the past few years as well.
Yes, so we've started down that path.
Okay.
I can't say how long it takes because it involves working with the state to extract ourselves if we do some kind of change. So we have to follow their rules and try to find the most advantageous way of changing the plan.
Is it something to do in the next General Assembly?
I can't give you that information.
Okay.
I don't know all the facts.
Yeah.
We started talking about it.
Yep.
HR manager, city manager, and myself are working out those two elements, pay scale and providing another retirement option.
Yeah, thank you.
I think if we do our research, we'll find out that a defined contribution is not going to be a cheaper route than a defined benefit, which is what we have at each level.
I think a defined contribution plan is a cheaper route for. Now, I want to qualify. I'm not talking about police and fire. We have a pension plan for police and fire.
Right, that's untouchable.
Defined contribution plan, by its definition, is the employee puts in something and we match it, and we have a cap to our match. On a defined benefit plan, the employer has to put in anything that's required to pay a benefit at the time of retirement, a defined, calculated benefit. So if the market turns down, the city's employer contribution has to increase. So we bear the investment risk of the market. With a defined contribution plan, the percent that we're going to put in for everybody's salaries that's in that plan is fixed. So we can structure it so that it does not cost us any more than the current costs of the state plan for us. Right now, we're around between 10 and 11% of employees' salaries are going to the state.
So where's the other 20% go? We usually calculate that it's 30% for benefits. So is that current
So that's
benefits?
so depending on what you're referring to, that includes FICA and an estimate for medical and dental, those benefits, and VEBA. We offer a VEBA plan as well that requires a 2% employer contribution. So depending on what you're looking at, that number for AFSCME and non-reps is one thing, and for police and fire is much higher, so.
And would employees or their representatives have a role in this decision? Because currently AFSCME represents.
Oh, no, so we can't do anything for the unions unless it's in line with their, agreement. So, we can't do anything to their benefits without working with them at the table. So what I'm doing now is just supposing what group we could change benefits for, and there's non-represented folks, and there's the AFSCME folks, and we have to deal with it in two completely separate different ways.
So you're talking about the unrepresented group, really?
When you say what I'm talking about?
I mean, to consider changing their retirement benefit.
That is the only group that we could do from a management perspective, but I presume that we would get input from the group anyway as to how we're changing it.
Some jurisdictions have given them an option, choice. That's one thing, but there's always some sort of a vote of some sort to employees, right?
I don't know. So
I know I'm too far
yeah,
down the
we've
line,
we've gotten off on a tangent here, and you're asking me questions about things I can't give you a clear answer to because I'm not the expert.
I'm glad we're looking at it at least. Anything for the good? Oh, I wasn't on mic. Anything for the good of the order? With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.